Hey folks, I'm on the road again, so I thought I'd record a little bit with some thoughts that I had the last couple days. I was going to try and get a video out yesterday, but the day was just too full with stuff going on. Turned into not a bad day though. It was pretty nice. Had a little bit of success with Uber in the evening, and overall not a bad day. So one of the things I was thinking about is how hard it is to actually convince people of anything. That includes me. That includes we all got to recognize ourselves in this stuff. And it's impossible actually to convince somebody who does not want to be convinced. The nature of the world is such that there are opposing views to every view. So even if you have, say, an opinion that something is happening, like climate change is happening, so you accept the expert consensus that climate change is happening, how do you convince somebody who chooses to believe the opposite view, that climate change is not even a thing, and they do two things? First, they do a number of things. First, they tell you that they have an expert that agrees with them. Why is their expert not as valuable as yours? That's the way that they think, right? So the question becomes, why is my expert better than your expert? Well, my expert, I have multiple experts. I have the entire consensus of evidence that says that climate change is a real thing. But have I seen that evidence? Have I witnessed that? Do I have the expertise to analyze that and understand it? No, not necessarily. Most likely not, actually. But so on some level, I'm just trusting a bunch of experts. The fact that a group of experts has actually come together and put out a statement, and they've demonstrated that through other sources that the vast majority of experts agree on climate change, that's all basically irrelevant if you're not a person who can analyze this stuff and somebody decides that they're going to believe an expert, quote unquote expert, on the opposite side of the issue. Excuse me, sorry about that. The second thing that people do is that they tend to think that whatever side is considered the norm, the mainstream, the opposing view is being suppressed in some way. We see this all the time in discussions about the pharmaceutical industry, discussions about genetic modification of food. We see this in discussions of climate change. I mean, many people have said many times that, that climate change is happening is part of the mainstream conspiracy, and any outside view is then rejected wholeheartedly, as well as is suppressed by the media that is beholden to the climate change side of things, or the pharmaceutical industry owns the media or pays off the media, so therefore the contradicting voices are being quieted and suppressed, And if you have an expert on your side, even if it's just the only one, and you believe that an industry or an organization of companies or a group of companies or a company or whatever, a corporation, is willing to silence that expert or any other dissenting voices. And not to say that these things don't happen. These things do happen on some level, which is part of the problem. So, A, you have an expert who disagrees with the mainstream view. B, you have suppression of dissenting voices. Then you have this calculus that goes on in a person's head that says that, okay, therefore, it makes sense to be questioning the mainstream consensus. And yeah, of course, it does make sense to be questioning the mainstream consensus. The trouble then becomes, like, who are you believing and what are you believing? And how firm should you be in those beliefs? Like, of course, climate change is a fact. It just is the way it is. 97% of the evidence supports it. 97%, it's probably even higher now, actually. I keep using that number because that's traditionally been what the number was. But the consensus of expert opinion, as well as the consensus of scientific conclusions of research, shows us that climate change is happening, and it's man-made. It's caused by human behavior emitting greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. This is just a fact. This is just how it is. At some point, you have to go from I accept this, but I'm questioning, to this is just the way it is. But the trouble comes when you're like trying to convince somebody else that refuses to accept that. My partner and I, we were having a discussion the other day, and she likes to push my buttons. So we're arguing, and it occurred to me at one point that there's simply no way, once somebody decides that they do not want to believe what you're saying, you will not convince them. The best you can do is argue until you're less frustrated, or walk away from the situation. Because if somebody believes in alternative medicines, they have quote-unquote experts on their side. They have a media sphere or an online community sphere where they know, quote-unquote know, they say they know that their views are being suppressed by the mainstream media. There's many good reasons they believe that the pharmaceutical industry is suppressing cures that there's not. The point is, they believe this, and it makes sense to believe this. It's wrong. And the reason that it's wrong, well, there's many, many reasons why they're wrong. And part of that is because they are not actually looking at they're not looking at all of the evidence. They're looking at what confirms their bias. And this is another thing that they do. They also say that you are looking for only the things that confirm your bias. Like, this is why the whole throwing of logical fallacies at people doesn't actually work. You can't tell somebody that they're behaving in a way that is illogical, because everybody believes that their logic is sound. How many times have you seen some right-wing nut job, pardon the psychophobic term there, some right-wing pundit say that they they see say their whole rhetoric around trans people, right? Like, they say men have a penis and girls have a vagina, or women have a vagina, and that's just logic. You can't get away from that. It's basic science, biologic facts. And no, it's not. It's not logic. It's not scientific fact. It's not basic biology. It's none of what they say it is. But you cannot get them to acknowledge that. It's never going to happen. And I guess I'm just at a loss as to what we're supposed to be doing here. How are we supposed to make any kind of headway in any kind of educational direction if people just simply choose what they believe? And I think I'm right about a lot of things. And maybe I'm not. But there's a lot of things that I am right about. And how do you convince somebody that homeopathy is nonsense if they refuse to accept any of the surrounding facts about it? I know that there's people who have had better success than I have, but it's just not a thing that you can do. You can't convince people through argumentation. Not generally, anyway. I guess technically I was convinced of the reality of climate change. But it wasn't because of the argument I was in. It was because I was arguing with somebody I respected, and they initiated a cognitive dissonance in my, they caused me to consider, well, I can't even say that that's true. I can't say that I felt that cognitive dissonance and recognized it. I don't remember. What I remember at this point of that discussion is just being mad and trying to be like, okay, I'm going to go and find the evidence that supports my argument. I'm going to go and I'm going to prove to my friend that climate change is bullshit concocted by the left trying to destroy capitalism or whatever I happen to believe at the time. I just remember that I was looking for evidence to support my conclusion. And when I couldn't find it, when everywhere I looked, it was contradictory evidence, and it was put out by reputable sources, like sources that made sense, like university research departments, like scientists all over the writing blogs and stuff, where I found that the people writing the blogs on the anti-climate change side, they were not scientists. They were just random pundits or like political scientists, or they were, just random people, computer technicians. Like, they call themselves scientists excuse me, but they're not. So maybe there's something to that. Maybe there's something about the idea that you need to ingratiate yourself with people. You need to develop relationships with people, even if they are wrong about a lot of things. Like, I mean, I believe that all the evidence shows that capitalism does not work for the average person, and specifically hurts the environment and society. It just to benefit a small group of individuals who happen to be the owners of the largest companies in the world and investors in the largest companies in the world. Like, there's lots of millionaires and billionaires that are sucking the life out of the working people of society and not paying them their justified due in return. And I think that's obvious. I think all the evidence points to that. But to somebody who says, I'm a capitalist, how do you fucking compete with that? How do you convince them? Like, I have many capitalist friends. And yet I still have never seen any of them go and look for the evidence and come back to me and say, well, actually, you know what? I looked, and it turns out that capitalism does suck. So how do we get them to do that? How do we convince people to look for the evidence on their own, especially in a Google-driven society where you can look something up, and if you're not already browsing in incognito in an unsigned and not signed into your Gmail account, like, if you're not specifically trying to find whatever happens to be the top results and not the results that are fed to you directly, how do you convince people who are going to be fed the results that confirm their biases? It's a tough thing to. It's a tough situation, and you're never ever going to do it in the moment. You're never going to convince somebody in that moment that they're wrong, or that you're right, or that they should trust your experts more than they trust their expert. We can go around arguing on the internet all day, every day, and Facebook and Twitter, and tearing each other apart. But I think it's all meaningless. I think it's all fruitless. I think on some level, what you have to do is start just putting information out there and trying to educate people as best you can and providing them with the best possible sources. And part of the trouble here is, like, I'm obviously not an expert in anything. I'm just a fucking guy who spent a lot of time learning about how wrong I was. And not everybody's willing to do that. So it's difficult, I guess. And feels hopeless. So there's that. That's great, right? It feels hopeless. Fuck. Especially when we're coming up on multiple elections. There's an election here in my home province. There's an election 2 provinces over in BC for the premier there. The United States down south is having an election coming up in like less than a month for their president, and who knows how the fuck that's gonna end up. Tribalism and polarization are a problem, but not because polarization or tribalism is in and of itself a problem. The problem is that people have not evolved the ability to We don't have that thing that lets us recognize when we're wrong. Everything about our need to survive has made it so that we confirm what we already believe all the time. So, I don't know what to do. That's depressing, isn't it? But this has been plenty fucking long enough. If you think that this is valuable information, it's not. This is just me rambling. If you think that I said something worth listening to, though, maybe share this video around. Make sure to like, subscribe, all the jazz, all that stuff that you do with videos that you want other people to be able to see. I guess the way things work is if you hit the like thing, then more people, then it moves it up. And I mean, 5 likes, maybe not much, but 10 likes, 100 likes, the more you get, the more people will see it, the more people are watching it, the more it pushes it into the sphere where people can see it. So yeah, do all these things. Make sure to share it if you think that I'm saying something valuable. That's all I've got, I think, for today. I'm going to be recording an episode of my podcast, The Mind of a Skeptical Leftist, today. I will probably publish a blog entry today. I've already got it written. I just need to decide whether or not to publish it. I'm recording an episode of my Saskatchewan Politics podcast, From Many People's Strength, today. So that will be out tomorrow. And then on Wednesday, we're going to record an episode of Skeptarchy. So that will hopefully be out Thursday or Friday. And yeah. I hope this finds everybody well. And thanks for watching. Stay safe.